Chapter 20. The Ringing Cedars of Russia. I decided to go back to my apartment. Moscow was already feeling the touch of spring. All that remained in the kitchen was half a bottle of sunflower seed oil and some sugar. I needed to replenish my larder and decided to sell my winter shapka, which was made of mink. It was a real mink hat, not imitation, and cost a great deal. Of course, the winter weather was almost over now, but I thought I might get at least something for it, so I headed for one of Moscow's many outdoor markets. I went up to various merchants selling fruit and other goods. They looked at the shapka, but were in no hurry to buy it. I had already decided to lower the price when two men approached me. They turned the shapka over in their hands, feeling the fur. "I need to try it on. Go see if you can borrow a mirror somewhere," one of them said to his companion, suggested I follow him off to one side. We reached a secluded spot at the end of a row of stalls and stopped to wait for his companion with the mirror. We didn't have to wait long. He crept up stealthily from behind, and the blow on the back of my head first caused me to see stars. Then my whole vision went blurry. I managed to grab hold of the fence to stop myself from falling to the ground, but when I came to, my buyers were nowhere to be seen. The shapka, too, was gone. Only a couple of women were there, making sympathetic oohs and ahs. "Are you okay? Awful bastards, those. Here's a crate. You can sit down for a bit." I stayed standing against the fence for a while longer and then slowly made my way out of the market area. A spring drizzle was falling. I was about to cross the street and stopped on the curb to look both ways. There was a painful ringing in my head. I wasn't watching, and a passing car sprayed me with water from a puddle, thoroughly wetting my trousers and windbreaker flaps. I was trying to figure out what to do next when a truck whizzed by, covering me with more spray from the same puddle, and this time the spray flew right into my face. I stepped back from the curb and took refuge from the rain under the awning of one of the commercial kiosks, and tried to think of my next plan of action. There was no way, I realized, I could get into a metro station looking like this. It was 3 stops to my apartment. Sure, I could walk it, but the way I looked, I still might get picked up by the police thinking I was a drunk or a tramp or just a suspicious person. Then you stand there trying to explain and justify yourself while they investigate your case. What could I tell them anyway? Who am I now? Then I saw this man. He was shuffling slowly along the sidewalk carrying 2 cases of empty bottles. He looked like one of those tramps or boozers who often circulate among kiosks that sell spirits on tap. Our eyes met. He stopped, put down his cases on the sidewalk, and struck up a conversation with me. "What are you standing there looking at? This is my territory. On your way," he said quietly, though not without an air of authority. Not wanting to argue with him or cross him, indeed, not having the strength to do so, I replied, "I don't need your territory. I'll just gather myself and leave." But he continued, "And where will you go?" "None of your business where I am going. I'll just leave, and that's it." "And will you make it?" "I'll make it. If I'm not interfered with, leave me alone." "The way you look, you won't stand very long or walk very far." "What's that to you?" "You haven't got a home to go to?" "What? A novice, eh? Okay, wait here a moment." He picked up his cases and walked off. He came back a moment later with a wrapped parcel and again started speaking to me. "Follow me." "Where are we going?" "To a place where you can rest for a couple of hours, or maybe till morning. You can get yourself dried out. Then you can proceed on your way." Following after him, I asked, "Is your apartment close by?" Without turning his head, he responded, "You couldn't get to my apartment if you walked your whole life long. I don't have any apartment. I have my deployment quarters." We walked up to a door leading to the basement of a multi-story block of flats. He told me to stand over to one side while he looked around, waiting until none of the tenants were to be seen, then stuck something that looked like a key into the lock and opened the door. It was warmer in the basement than on the street. Heat came up from hot water pipes which had been deliberately stripped of their insulation, probably by tramps. On the floor in the one corner stood a pile of rags, illuminated by a dim light filtering in through a dust-covered basement window. But we went on past them into a far corner which stood empty. He unwrapped the parcel and brought out a bottle of mineral water and uncapped it. Taking a swallow of water in his mouth, he sprayed it all around as though from an atomizer. "That's to keep the dust down," he explained. Then he slightly moved a divider standing in the corner to one side. From the narrow space between the divider and the wall, he took out 2 sheets of plywood covered with plastic. Then he slightly moved a divider standing in the corner to one side. From the narrow space between the divider and the wall, he took out 2 sheets of plywood covered with plastic, along with several pieces of plastic-covered cardboard. He used them to lay out 2 makeshift bunks on the floor. Taking an old food tin from the corner, he lit the candle it was holding. The lid of the tin was not completely detached. It was clean and bent slightly upwards in a semicircle to serve as a reflector. This primitive device illuminated the edges of the bunks and the half-meter of space between them. Here he spread out a sheet of newspaper on which he started laying the contents of the parcel: cheese, bread, and 2 packages of kefir. Neatly slicing the cheese, he issued an invitation. "What are you standing there for? Come on, sit down. Take off your jacket. Hang it over the pipe. When it dries, we'll clean it. I've got a brush. Your trousers will dry out without taking them off. Try not to wrinkle them." Then he brought out 2 drams of vodka, and we sat down to eat. In contrast to the dirty basement floor all around us, the corner my companion had managed to set up for himself had an air of cleanliness and coziness. After we clinked glasses, he introduced himself. "Call me Ivan. Nobody here bothers with patronymics." The way he improvised the bunks and set out the food on the newspaper despite the dirty floor created a clean and cozy atmosphere in his basement corner. "I don't suppose you have anything softer to lie on?" I asked after supper. "You can't even keep rags down here. They only get dirty, and then they'll start to smell. I've got neighbors over in that corner. 2 of them. They show up from time to time. They've made one hell of a dirty mess." We've got involved in a conversation. I started answering his questions, and in doing so I ended up inadvertently telling him about my meeting with Anastasia, her lifestyle and her abilities, about her Ray, her dreams and aspirations. He was the first person I had talked with about Anastasia. I myself don't know why I told him about her eccentricities, about her dream, and how I promised to help her. I had indeed tried to set up a fellowship of pure-minded entrepreneurs, but had made a major mistake. I should have written the book first. "Now, I'll set about writing one, and I'll try to get it published," I affirmed. "Anastasia said the book would be needed first." "Are you really confident you can write it and get it published without any funds?" "I don't know whether I'm confident or not, but I shall certainly work in that direction." "That means you have a goal, and you're going for it?" "I'm going to try." And you're sure you'll make it?" "I'm going to try." "Yeah, a book. You'll be needing a good artist to do the cover, someone who can do it with heart, in line with the meaning of the book, with the goal. And where are you going to find an artist if you haven't got any money?" "I'll have to do it without an artist, without a fancy cover." "You should do it up brown, with a cover that really fits in with the book. If I had good paper, brushes, and paints, I'd help you, only those things cost a lot now." "You mean to say you're an artist? Professional?" "I'm an officer, but I've loved drawing and painting since childhood. I joined various art groups. Whenever I could steal some time, I'd paint pictures and give them to friends." "Well, why did you go and become an officer if you still wanted to paint all those years?" "My great-grandfather was an officer, my grandfather and my father too. I loved and respected my father. I felt what he wanted me to be, so I tried to be that, and made it all the way to colonel." "Where did you serve?" "Mainly in the KGB. That's where I resigned from." "Through attrition, or were you forced out?" "It was my decision, just couldn't take it anymore." "What couldn't you take?" You know the popular song, "Oh, officers, officers, your heart is under fire"? They tried to kill you? They made an attempt on your life? Did they shoot at you, maybe to settle some kind of score? Officers often get shot at. It's an age-old story. Officers meeting up with bullets, going to the defense of those behind them. going along, not suspecting their own hearts were under fire, not suspecting the fatal shot to come from behind, an accurate shot, an exploding bullet, and straight to the heart. How so? Remember the pre-perestroika times? The celebrations, 1st of May, 7th of November. Huge columns of people crying, "Hurrah! Glory to! Long live!" Me and the other officers, not just those from the KGB, were proud of the fact that we were the defenders of our people. We were protecting them. For most officers, this was their whole reason for living. Then came perestroika and glasnost. Other shouts began to be heard, and it turned out that we, the KGB officers, were bastards, executioners. We were defending the wrong people and the wrong things. The ones that earlier marched in Soviet columns under red banners had gone over to march in other columns under different banners, and we got left to take the blame. I had a wife, 9 years younger than me, a real beauty. I loved her, still do. She was so proud of me. We had a son, an only child. He came along rather late. How shall I say it? Now he's 17. In the beginning, he too was proud of me. He respected me. Then, after this whole business started, my wife became very quiet. She wouldn't look me in the eye. She began to be ashamed of me. I handed in my resignation and took a job as a security guard at a commercial bank. I hid my KGB uniform where nobody would find it, but there were unasked questions still hanging in the air over my wife and son. You can't answer questions which haven't been asked. They saw the answers in the paper and on TV screens. Turned out we officers were involved in nothing but our dachas, and, of course, oppression. But, I interjected, they showed on TV some pretty fancy dachas of the military elite, and they showed the real thing, not just faked pictures. Yeah, they showed the real thing, not just faked pictures. Only those dachas were sleazy chicken houses compared to what many of those who accuse their owners having themselves today. Look at you, you had a whole ship at your disposal. That's a lot bigger than a general's dacha. And don't forget, that general was once a cadet. He dug trenches. Then he became a lieutenant, got shifted about from barracks to barracks, and naturally he wanted to have a house and a dacha for his family, just like everyone else. And who knows how many times he had to jump out of his warm bed in the middle of the night in that same dacha to go out on an emergency mission. Officers used to be respected in Russia. They were rewarded with an estate. Now it's been decided that a simple dacha with 1,500 square meters of land is too much for a general. Everybody lived differently before, I observed. Differently, yes, everybody, but you can't tell me it wasn't the officers who were singled out for blame ahead of everyone else. It was the officers who demonstrated on the Senate Square. They were thinking of the people. These officers were later sent either to the scaffold or to the mines in Siberia. Nobody stood up to defend them. Later, Russian officers fought for the Tsar and the fatherland in the trenches against the Germans. And back home, revolutionary patriots were already getting bullets ready for their hearts more terrible than the leaden ones. White guards, monsters, that was what they called the officers returning from the war. Officers who were simply trying to maintain order. There was chaos all around. Everything was falling apart. All our former values, both material and spiritual, were being either torched or trampled upon. It was so hard for them, those white guard officers. So they put on clean underwear under their uniforms and went on a psychological attack. You know what's meant by psychological attack? It's when you try to scare the hell out of your opponent. I've seen it in films. In Chapayev, for example, the white guard officers are advancing in formation, and they get staffed by machine gun fire. Some fall, but the others close ranks and keep advancing. Yeah, that's it. They fall and still keep advancing. But the thing is that they weren't really attacking to begin with. How so? What was the point of advancing then? In military practice, the whole reason for, the goal of any attack is either the capture or the physical annihilation of the enemy, preferably with the least possible loss in the ranks of the attackers. To keep advancing against the strafing from machine guns concealed in trenches, that was only done when there was another goal set, either consciously or subconsciously. What goal? Maybe, and this goes against the logic of the art of war, it was to demonstrate something to the enemy, even at the cost of one's own life, to make the soldiers firing the guns and killing the advancing marchers stop and think, to realize something, and not fire at others. So, in that case, their death would be something like Jesus Christ's death on the cross? Something like that. We still managed to remember Christ, somehow. The young cadets and generals who advanced against their attackers, we've forgotten. Maybe even now their souls, dressed in clean underwear under their officers' uniforms, are standing in front of the bullets we are firing, and pleading with us, calling on us to stop and think. Why would they be calling to us? When they were being fired on, we weren't even born. No, we weren't, but bullets are still flying around today, new bullets. Who, if not us, is doing the firing? Indeed, bullets are still flying around today. And just why have they been flying around all these years? Why did you leave home? I couldn't stand the way he stared at me. The way who stared at you? We were watching TV one night. My wife was in the kitchen and my son and I were watching together. Then one of those political programs came on. They started talking about the KGB. You know, a real smear campaign. I deliberately picked up a newspaper and made it look like I was reading, as though I wasn't interested in what they were saying. I was hoping my son would switch to another program. He's never been interested in politics. He likes music. But he didn't change the channel. I rustled my paper, stealing glances at him out of the corner of my eye. And I saw him sitting in the chair, his hands gripping the arms of the chair so tight they turned white. He didn't move a muscle. I realized he wasn't going to change the channel. I held on as long as I could, hiding behind the paper. Then I couldn't take it anymore. I smashed the paper into a ball and threw it to one side, got up sharply and yelled, "Are you going to turn the damn thing off? Are you?" My son got up, but he didn't go over to the TV. He stood opposite me, staring me in the eye, and said nothing. The TV program was still going, but my son just kept on staring at me. Later that night, I wrote them a note. I said I was going away for a while, had no choice. And then I left for good. Why for good? Because. For a long time, neither of us uttered a word. I tried to make myself a bit more comfortable on the bunk so I could drift off, but then the colonel started talking again. "So you tell me Anastasia said she'd bring people through the dark forces window of time. She'd bring them through, and that's it?" "Yeah, that's what she said, and she herself believes that she can make it happen." Ah, she should have a hand-picked regiment. I'd become a soldier again to serve in that regiment. "What's this about a regiment?" I retorted. "You didn't get it. She rejects the use of force. She wants to persuade people by some other means. She's trying to do that with her ray. I think, or rather I feel, that she's going to do it. There's a lot of people that will want to be warmed by her ray. But not many of them will understand that they themselves will have to put in something from their own brain power. Anastasia needs help. She's all alone. She hasn't even got a single platoon at her command. So, you see, she's recruited you. She's commissioned you. And here you are lying in a basement like a tramp. And you call yourself an entrepreneur after that. Well, you KGBer, you're lying here too. Okay, go to sleep, soldier. It's rather cold in your barracks. Well, that's the way it is, isn't it? Curl up into a ball, conserve your heat. Then he got up and took out from behind the divider yet another plastic bag. He got something out of it to cover me with. In the dim light of the candle I could see, shining right under my nose, 3 stars in the epaulette of a great coat. It was warm under the coat, and I fell asleep. I was half asleep when I heard the tramps come in and head for their rag corner. They demanded the colonel hand them over a bottle for my overnight stay. He promised to settle it in the morning, but they insisted, threateningly, that he better pay up now or else. The colonel then moved his bunk, placing it between me and the newcomer tramps, declaring, "You touch him only over my dead body." And he lay down on his bunk, shielding me from the new arrivals. Then everything went quiet again. I felt warm and peaceful. I was awakened by the colonel shaking my shoulder. "Get up, turn out. We gotta get out of here." The first rays of dawn were barely beginning to show themselves through the dim basement window. I sat up on my bunk. Not only did I have a splitting headache, but I found I had trouble breathing. "It's still early. The dawn hasn't even broken," I observed. "A little longer and it'll be too late. They've lit some cotton wool with powder. It's an old trick. A little longer and we'll be suffocated." He went to the window and started working the window frame loose with an iron bar. The tramps had locked the door from the outside. Taking out the frame, he broke the glass and crawled through the aperture. The basement window opened to the concrete well, covered with a grating. The colonel began fiddling with the grating, trying to dislodge it, but somehow it wasn't working. I stayed leaning against a wall. My head was spinning. The colonel stuck his head back through the window opening and ordered, "Squat down! Less smoke near the floor. Try not to move. Breathe in less air." He forced the grating out with his shoulders. He moved it off and helped me clamber out. We sat on the cement curb outside the basement window, silently filling our lungs with the pre-dawn air of an awakening city. The spinning in my head gradually lessened. The air started feeling cold. Each of us sat there, thinking his own thoughts. Then I said, "Your neighbors aren't very friendly. They're the ones in charge here?" "Everyone's in charge of himself. They got their own business. They bring in a new homeless person and make him pay for staying overnight. If he refuses to pay, they slip something into his drink or suffocate him in his sleep, like they tried to do to us. And then they take whatever they like from him. If he's got anything worth taking, that is." "And you're telling me that you, a KGBer, are indifferent to it all? You could earn yourself some pretty points by giving chaps like that the once over. Or were you just a pencil pusher sitting in an office all day? Maybe you didn't know how to work the street." "I worked in an office, and I worked outside the office. I knew what to do. But to know the moves, that's not the same as applying them. A criminal, an enemy, that's one thing. But here we're dealing with human beings. I might calculate wrong, use too much deadly force." "You call those human beings? While you're rationalizing away, they're out there robbing people blind. They're even ready to commit murder." "Yeah, they're ready to commit murder, but you won't stop them by physical means." "You sit there philosophizing, but we almost died. We barely managed to escape. Others might not be so lucky." "Yeah, others might not be so lucky." "There, you see? Then how come you're philosophizing and not acting?" "I can't use violence on people. You see what I mean? I could calculate wrong. You may as well get going to your own deployment quarters. It's dawn already." I got up, shook his hand, and left. I had gone but a few steps when he called after me. "Wait! Come back here a moment." I approached the homeless colonel sitting on the concrete curb. He was just sitting there, his head lowered, not saying a word. "Hey, why did you call me?" After a moment's pause, he spoke. "So, you think you'll make it okay?" "I think I can. It's not far. 3 metro stops, that's all. I'll make it." "I mean, do you think you'll reach your goal? Are you sure? Writing a book, getting it published?" "I'll give it a try. First, I'll try writing." "So, Anastasia said it should work out for you?" "That's what she said." "Then why didn't you do that right off?" The other seemed more important. "So, that means you're not good at following orders properly." "Anastasia didn't order me. She asked me." "She asked you. So, she worked out the tactics and strategy herself, and you thought you'd do it your way, and you just loused things up." "That's how it turned out." "That's how it turned out. You gotta pay closer attention to your orders. Here, take this." He held out something wrapped in a small plastic package. I unwrapped it and saw through the clear plastic a golden wedding band and a silver cross on a little chain. "A dealer will give you half price for these. Let him have them for half price. Maybe it'll help see you through. If you've got nowhere to stay, come back here. I'll take care of them." "What are you talking about? I can't take these." "Don't rationalize. It's time for you to go. So go. Look to it. Just go." "I'm telling you, I can't take them." I tried to give him back the ring and the little cross, but I was met by an authoritative and at the same time pleading stare. "About face. Forward, march," he commanded in a whisper that was restrained, yet brooked no contradiction. A moment later came another plea. Just be sure you make it. Arriving at my flat, I felt like going to sleep and even got to the point of lying down, but I couldn't get the homeless colonel out of my head. I got dressed in some clean clothes and went to see him. Along the way, I thought, maybe he'll agree to move in with me. He's adaptable to anything. He's practical and he's neat. Besides, he's an artist. Maybe he'll do a picture for the book's cover, and it'll be easier to find some rent money if we're together. I had no money for the next month's rent. As I approached the basement window we had climbed out of earlier that morning, I saw a group of people, tenants from the building, a police car, and an ambulance. The homeless colonel was lying on the ground, his eyes closed and a smile on his face. His face and body were splattered with wet dirt. One dead hand was clenched around a piece of red brick. A broken wooden crate stood against the wall. A court medical assessor was writing something down on a notepad. He was standing behind the corpse of another man, dressed in a shabby, rumpled clothing with a disfigured face. The little crowd that had gathered, no doubt comprised of the building's tenants. One woman was rattling on excitedly. I was walking me dog, and I saw him, the one smilin', perched on the crate, his face to the wall, and the three of them, tramps by the look of it, 2 men and a woman with him, comes at him from behind. The man gives the crate a kick and falls off the crate to the ground. They start kicking him, cursing all the while they did. I yells at them. They stop kicking him. Old Smiley here, he gets up, see? He has a pretty hard time getting up, too. And he tells them to sod off and not show their faces around here again. They starts cursing again, and then they comes at him full force. As they get closer, he gives a straight chop with the back of his hand to the throat of the bloke what kicked the crate. It's not that he's waving his arms about or anything. He's just lands the other bloke and a chop so he doubles up and can't breathe. I yells at him again, and 2 of them run straight off, see? First the woman, then the man after her. Smiley's now clutching at his heart. He ought to sit down or lie down straight off, if it's his heart what's given out. But no, he goes back to his crate, moves ever so slowly, he does, puts his crate back against the wall, then he gets back up on it. I can see he's in a really bad way. He starts falling, and he slides down, still drawing on the wall with that red brick of his, and keeps on drawing till he lands himself on the ground, and he's lying there face up, right against the wall. I runs over, looks, and he ain't breathing. Not breathing, but he's smiling. Why did he climb up on that crate? I asked the woman. Yeah, why did he climb up if his heart was given out? Echoed a voice from the crowd. He wanted to keep on drawing. And when those 3 blokes came at him from behind, he was drawing. That's what he was doing. That's probably why he didn't see him coming. I'd be walking me dog for a long time, and there he is, standing on his crate and drawing. He didn't turn round, not even once. You can see what he drew up there on the wall. And the woman pointed on the building. On the gray brick wall of the building could be seen in the circular outline of the sun, and in the middle of it a cedar branch, and around the perimeter of the sun circle some letters printed rather unevenly. I went closer to the wall and read, "Ringing Cedars of Russia." Apart from that, there were rays emanating from the sun. There were only 3 of them. The homeless colonel didn't manage to draw any more. 2 of the rays were short and straight, while the third was wavy and fading away. They extended right down to the base of the wall where the dead homeless colonel was lying on the ground smiling. I looked at the smiling face smeared with dirt and thought to myself, maybe in the last moments of his life Anastasia managed to touch him with her ray and warm him up. At least warm his soul up a little and carry it off to a bright infinity. I watched as the corpses were loaded into the ambulance. My colonel was thrown carelessly in the process, his head striking the floor of the ambulance. I couldn't take it. I tore off my jacket, ran over to the ambulance, and started demanding they put my jacket under his head. One of the orderlies swore at me, but the other took the jacket without a word and placed it under the colonel's graying head. The vehicle drove off. Everything was empty, just as if nothing had happened. I stood there a while, looking at the drawing and inscription illuminated by the morning sun. My thoughts began getting all mixed up. I had to do something, at least something for him, for this KGBer, a Russian officer who had perished on the spot. But what? What indeed? Then it came to me. I'm going to put your drawing, my dear officer, on the cover of my book. The book I most definitely will write. Even though I don't know yet how to write, I'll still write one, and not just one, and on all of them I'll put your drawing. It'll be my emblem. And in the book, I'll tell all Russians, my fellow Russians, don't shoot at the hearts of your officers with invisible exploding bullets, bullets of cruelty and heartlessness. Don't shoot from behind at any soldiers, be they white or red, or even blue or green, ensigns or generals. The bullets you fire at them from behind are more terrible than the leaden ones. My fellow Russians, do not shoot at your officers.